Are you a
10, 9, 8,
Okay, so we're gonna do the ad.
Welcome to Gather Geeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. This episode is a Gather Geeks special sponsor edition. Here's your host, BizBash chairman and founder, David Adler.
Welcome to this special edition of Gather Geeks. Today we are going to dig into the future to understand how the integration of in real life and platforms work in a hybrid world. We're going to hear some practical real life solutions to how to use virtual and live events separately and together. Everyone in our industry is in the process of deconstructing events and rebuilding them from scratch using in real life and their new digital cousins. Our guests today are Mike Sokoloff, the Director of Sales for Six Connect, and Adam Rosen, the Associate Vice President of Cultural Relations and University Events of Southern California. This is the story about how a client and a supplier work together to experiment to create experiences that create a sense of belonging. So let's take a listen. Mike, tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing to pivot back, in many cases, to the new world. You've done an incredible job of pivoting to serve the world during this pandemic, but now things are changing rapidly. Why don't you give us a little bit about what your products are doing and how innovative you're being and how you see the world right now?
There's a couple of things that we've been working on as an organization. One is the scheduling piece of the meetings themselves, is giving the ability for the attendees to create their own personal schedule within the environment. That's been a big ask because a lot of people want to move around and do things on their own. But having that agenda also available so that you can even see the on-site pieces, David, but then also what's happening in the virtual world as well, and then create that agenda. That's one piece that we've done a lot with. Our AI matchmaking is a really big leap as it relates to virtual, where the system will look at what people are doing within the environment, seeing who they're talking to, who they're networking with, what content they're looking at, and then you can press a button which would show your matches. So the system works with Amazon technology, and it will match you to different people within the environment that are similar to you. So that's AI matchmaking. And then also personal calendars within an environment. So let's just say you have an event that has multiple booths in it. So maybe each booth is a different vendor showing off their products, and you want to schedule a meeting with them. Before, it was difficult to actually schedule that meeting with people. And so there was products out there, third-party products like Calendly and other tools that were being used within the industry. But they were difficult to put together. They were difficult to connect into personal calendars through firewalls and things of that nature. So we built that directly into our platform. So now you have the ability to go in. If you're a booth representative, I'm manning a booth, I'm representing that booth. I can say I want to have meetings between 10 and 2, and I want to have 15-minute blocks where people can schedule those appointments directly with me. Those are just the built-in features. The other things that we've been working really hard on is partnerships and relationships with what I like to call third-party fund, because there's a lot of different things that you can do within a virtual environment. But what we're really trying to do these days is to have engagement, both from a virtual environment engagement, such as photo booths and the ability to have different types of music coming in, or just lots of different ways of engaging with individuals, but taking that engagement and bringing it also into the physical world, actually at a physical environment. So one of the things that Adam and I worked on was a 360-degree camera. And so what we did was we were able to work with Adam and his team to have this camera set up inside of the stadium during the graduation ceremonies, and people from anywhere in the world could click on the camera and zoom around and look around in this 360-degree view.
Wow.
Yeah, very, very cool stuff. Giving that ability for people to feel like they're there, to zoom in. They can actually maybe find their student and zoom right into them.
So how do you do third-party fun? I love that. I have not heard an app called third-party fun yet in my entire career. How do you, where's the fun store?
Well, we're working on that with our partners. And so we have different partners that bring different elements into it, such as games or photo booths or lots of different tools that are out there that are coming online as we speak, that third-party fun. And then we build relationships with them. We introduce them to our clients and customers. We just had a webinar last week all about 3 of our partnerships. And so as we continue to add more of these partners, we like to call them, some will be embedded directly in our platform, such as in an iframe, so that it looks and feels just like it's part of it. Others you will have to punch out of the environment into a browser session, if that makes sense. But ultimately, that's an area that I see just continuing to grow. That third-party fund is introducing Adam and other customers to those technologies, to those partners to help with that, such as we're talking to one partner right now with RFID. So they have RFID capabilities at a physical venue where someone could walk up, have their badge on them, and then automatically be registered through the RFID that they went by this booth. So then that technology would then take that registration and push that back into our environment so that from a reporting standpoint, you can see that at a physical location, this person actually went to a booth versus it all being virtual. So again, third-party fund is a key area that we're looking a lot to our partners for and new partners.
Have you found, the tried and true photo booth has been a winner for years and years. Is it still attractive? Is it a magnet for engagement?
Absolutely. And on site as well. I mean, the photo booth, you walk up to the backdrop, you shoot you snap a picture, and then you can put it online now. That's really, that's that hybrid piece. I actually am working with one partner that they do ice sculptures, David. And you take the ice sculpture physically on site at the venue itself, but you could then take that same ice sculpture and use it as a photo booth cover up. So like you take a virtual picture and then you can have that ice sculpture sitting there as the frame, if that makes sense.
So you're inside the ice sculpture almost.
You're inside the ice sculpture.
Oh, wow. Exactly. So we're just in the beginning of this era. This seems like what you're saying about, and then what I'm going to do is ask Adam, about how he's using these practically, but it seems like you're creating a toolbox of things that are really getting ready for this pivot back, which is happening at a rapid pace.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not just the webcast anymore that's coming live from the auditorium or live from the breakout session that's in the physical location of a hotel or a convention center. There's so much more that we're trying to bridge that gap between the 2 locations, such as games, where you have a game physically on site, but also everybody virtually can do that.
Okay, so what's the biggest game that's working now?
Right now, I'd probably tell you Kahoot is probably one of the big ones out there that's working very well in both a physical and a virtual environment.
Am I supposed to know what that is?
The answer is yes. So one of the things is what's called MultiScreen Engagement.
Uh-huh.
So it's purely not just the one screen that people are engaged with. So they're on a webcast, they're watching it, but they're playing a Kahoot game or another third-party game on their phone at the same time. So you would start off maybe with a QR code on the screen. You would start off with a QR code in the physical environment. People would pull out their phones, they would snap a picture of it. They would then have the ability to jump right into that game and have that, again, multi-engagement, multi-screen engagement is really key to having people enjoy both locations, either the physical location or the virtual location.
Are the attendees in live getting into the multi-screen and just as big as the people in virtual?
Yes.
And so are they multitasking and bumping into things, or are they just sitting at the table?
Well, it would be, say, like in a breakout session, in chairs, in an auditorium or things along that lines. Also, the ability for them to chat questions in where they're in a physical environment. We have chat built into our environment where if you're watching a webcast, you can chat a question off to the speaker. But if you're physical, they have to bring the microphone around, right? And ask people, do they have questions? Well, we have the ability now for people to just do that on their phones. Again, that multi-screen environment where they can chat the question in, the speaker gets it automatically, and then you can answer both people in the physical and in the virtual world.
Well, this is interesting. Let me pivot over to Adam, who I know from Warner Brothers, which is great, and he's at USC, as you've heard in the introduction. But he's bringing all of the tricks of the trade from that he's learned at Warner Brothers in his huge career to USC. Adam, how are you approaching hybrid now? And then how did you find these guys the right vendor, because this was a real challenging thing especially during the pandemic, when you were sort of had that holy crap moment of what the hell do we do now, to actually where what we're saying that Michael's talking about, these real practical things that integrate face-to-face and hybrid and live and virtual. So go ahead. Let's tell us your story, Adam.
So I'll start with how we found. So, we started producing virtual events last year after we all pivoted into being at home and not in person. So we began really with the launch into our commencement event. Our students were planning to graduate in the beginning of May, and here we were going out in March. And when we first went out, we thought, we'll be back by then, and it's going to go really fast.
Oh yeah. By Easter.
Right, exactly. It's just going to be a couple of weeks. And, we actually didn't make the decision to move from what we had planned in person to virtual until 3 weeks prior to our actual commencement date because of that. And so at the time, we didn't have time to research products. And so we built something. We had a company that we worked with, and we built a landing page that would host virtual content and could embed some chat and embed social media and video messages. And we went out and produced 12 hours of content and basically turned our streaming into broadcast television. And we broadcast all of these different events that we did for all of our graduates that were similar to what we would normally do for commencement. And after we finished that, and it was successful, and we had about 75,000 people that logged on during that day to tune in and watch their various celebrations for their time at the university, I sat down with my staff and said, what? Who knows how long we're going to be in this? If we're starting to be at home during this fall semester, then we've got to be ready to do, a handful of events that need to be virtual. And when we look at what we're doing with things like commencement, and we have what we call our new student convocation, which kicks off our fall semester, welcoming in our new classes and bringing in 3,000 new students, we need something that's going to be more than just give them a broadcast.
Well, you also have a history of taking events really seriously.
Yeah.
And I think it's the future of engagement is to have people participate in events, but not just perfunctory.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've always, my theory on events is that, you're about your participants in your program. And so you really have to look at it from the ground level up with everything that you do. And it's not just about, we're doing this nice thing, so let's just film it and throw it online. We have to be able to make sure that those at home are engaged in the same way. So we wanted to find a tool that we called a virtual campus. We wanted something where people would feel like they were coming to USC, even though it was through their screen. I felt very strongly that we needed to give people something that they had a connection to. And for us at the university, that connection is to the university. And so it was a way for us to cement their relationship and have them feel like, it's just another Zoom. No, while it is just another Zoom, we use Zoom as one of our broadcast technologies. They weren't going to Zoom. They were going to something that felt like they were at USC. And so we embarked in this huge process. We looked at 75 different vendor sites. We brought it down to about 20 that we looked at in depth, and then looked at 12 with hour and a half long presentations, and really worked through them with a large group from not just my team, but from across the university. And we came to 6Connects because they were the top of what we were looking for, to be able to create that experience that could embed our content in their system and completely customize it to make it feel like it was what we wanted to build.
Can you dig a little deeper into that? Because, we're seeing lots of people that are doing virtual. When you got down to the short hairs of this thing, what did you see as the differentiator? Because a lot of people say they do the same things in many cases, right? So in terms of, I'm trying to get at your frustration in making a choice.
Yeah, I think, it was that while there were a lot of companies and softwares and ways to do it, we needed to create something where, as a viewer, you felt like you were engaged in something that was more than what you were seeing. And so when we looked at, what was happening, and I looked at research of, why people tuned into different television and what they were looking to watch and what grabbed them in live television. And so the couple of areas that we looked at as key were production quality, which I looked at not so much just having nice video and having it sound good, but showing them something that was different. And so when we broadcast through Zoom, when you come to an event that is, ours through USC through Zoom, you're going to see somebody with graphics around them and in front of them with lower thirds like you do in television. Something where as a viewer, you're going to say, wait, how are they doing this on Zoom? And especially at that point back in early pandemic, there weren't a lot of technologies out there to do them. And so we literally built a full broadcast studio like one would broadcast television. We brought in our participants remotely and powered by Zoom as they do on television, and then enabled graphics and worked with our team to be able to make sure that production quality looked and sounded like you were broadcasting television just through Zoom.
So how did the 6Connect thing make sense then? What was the reason that you did that?
So then the second thing was what we found really quickly in the pandemic was what we now all know is Zoom fatigue, right? We've named it aptly. All the researchers have said that, if you're on it so long and but we quickly found that we were all tired of being on Zoom. We went from sitting in the office and walking into different rooms to have meetings to doing everything online. And so, what I said to my team is, if we're going to do events that are going to be on Zoom or on YouTube, people are going to get really tired of it really fast. So we have to figure out a way to get that content into something where they feel like there's more to do. And that's where the idea of what we found in 6Connects came about, is to create an environment virtually where we could have the same content. We could still broadcast it through Zoom. We could still do it through YouTube. We could pre-record something and just drop it on there as content available. But that it wasn't just, okay, I'm going to click on this link and get to Zoom. It was click into a site that became this virtual campus that gave you a sense of belonging, that created a feeling of excitement to do something different, and put you into an environment like you would be if you were coming to to the actual event, and then created other opportunities, as Mike was talking about, of virtual and connection to you at home. So when we were all remote, it was how can we connect our audience to each other and to the content, and we did that through interactive elements, design and things like the glorious photo booth, which I think is even better now than it ever has been before, with the advent of social media and being able to tag your photos and put them out there for the world to see.
Can you describe, the way I'm getting it, because this is radio, don't forget, into this podcast. Yeah. So I'm envisioning that you created like Starship USC. Is that an accurate thinking that's coming to mind when you're talking about it?
Yeah, I think so.
So what does it look like to explain to people that are visually thinking about this what it really looks like?
Yeah, so we took beautiful high-res images of the central portions of our campus. And so when you click to enter into 6Connects, what you're greeted with is the kind of iconic space that everybody who knows USC is. You're in this beautiful scape of the center of our campus and what we call Alumni Park towards our iconic Bovard administration building. And built into that, we added in some graphics for signage to be able to navigate you to where you need to go. But everything was reminiscent of what USC was. So when you would click on a location, it would take you to another USC location. So wherever you were, you would be like, oh, look at there, I'm at Tommy Trojan. And oh, that's the building where I had classes in when I was a student. So the idea was to create that familiarity and that sense of belonging by the graphics. And again, these are just, really high-res images that we're overlaying some graphics in.
But your research, when you said you researched television and what people want, this is part of what people want, you found, right? And where did that bit of research come from?
The good old internet, from everywhere. I think I'm one of those people that when I want to do something, I spend an enormous amount of time trying to figure out what the best practices from others. I think that, in this industry, we should, beg, borrow, and steal from each other, which helps us germinate new ideas. What is everybody else doing? And then what can I tweak, and, what worked well for them or what didn't work well, but I think I can adjust. And so, I just simply kind of looked up tricks in the trades. And I have a background in television. I should also say, I studied film. I was in the film and television industry for a little while. I did, as you mentioned, work at Warner Brothers and the events department for a good number of years doing events there. But it was really for us about how we could take this time of uncertainty and the pivot that we knew we needed to make into this virtual arena and get better engagement by any trick we could find in the book to be able to get people to feel like they wanted to keep coming back.
Okay, so everyone's sitting there waiting. What are the tricks? Because they want to steal them. The whole BizBash thing is letting people peek over the fence to see what other people are doing, because you can't get into someone else's event. Yeah. So let's peek over the fence to see what you are doing. and maybe it'll change the entire industry because you're such a big thinker in this world.
Well, thank you. So I think thing one is production. That just doing a Zoom doesn't cut it. You've got to be able to have some production quality behind that, and that means a couple of things. That means not just having graphics and being able to pull in other elements and lower thirds, but it means rehearsal time. That bringing people in, having a pre-conversation, talking through the flow, really making sure that those things we do when we're in person aren't going away when we're virtual. In fact, they're even more so important because the technology can fail you. And so having a backup plan, knowing if this happens, here's what you're going to do. That stage management of sorts, is really important. And then what we found from the virtual arena and the hybrid side is that engagement and content is all still king, right? If you can't engage through content, then you're going to lose them even if you get them there. And so we not only have to find the means to show them that they're interested and interesting with what you're moving towards, but you have to be able to keep them there with content. And what we know about virtual is that people want to spend less time in the space than they did previously. So we've lessened the time of our programs. We've made more small programs versus longer pieces. We've shortened what we've done to keep that attention span there. One of the first things we found when we were looking at events after we had done 20 or 30 is that we had a huge drop off after about 25 to 30 minutes. We would lose 25 to 30% of our audience immediately. And so we quickly pivoted and said, okay, we can't do hour-long things anymore. We have to keep them between 30 and 40 minutes at the most, and in a perfect world, 20, because then we don't see any drop-off. I think the piece that I always say, this has been for me, and whether you're in person or otherwise, is if you're not learning and changing after every event that you've done, even if you've done it 100 times, then you're doing it wrong. And we sit down afterwards and talk about, what will we learn? What will we have changed? Even if it's not in those exact terms after everything we do. Because and it's with something like this where it was all new for everybody, we were constantly changing, and we still are.
Well, it's interesting to know what is the legacy things that actually work that you did in virtual that now work even better in real life.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think we found some things in the way we present, right? And I've always been a big advocate of that. When you present, when somebody is giving a keynote or otherwise, that the graphics have to assist and not be the presentation. And so I think even more so when you're looking at a presentation means of a screen and you have to divide your focus in one area, right? The screen sharing that we've all seen in Zoom. We've really tried to work with presenters on understanding that slides should not be what you're saying. They should be to accompany and to enhance what you're saying. And I think it's had even a better effect than when I do that in person with folks, because the reality is they can see it. They can see that if I'm here talking to you and I've got the 3 points I'm talking about right next to me, that I'm going to tune you out because I've already read these by the time you've gotten through your first sentence.
And are people looking at the presenter or are they looking at the graphics? That's
a good question, right? We don't know now in the same way because we're not in person and we can't see their eyes, right? When you're in person and you got a screen or you got some small screens or 2 screens on the side, which is kind of the standard that we've all known in the industry, you can tell where they're looking. If somebody's kind of staring off to the side, it's pretty clear that you're not engaged. But in this virtual space, you're assuming that they're listening and looking at the content because we don't see their faces. And so with that, the way we've looked at it and the way I've looked at it and how we're directing it is that we have to make our speaking more engaging and provide, if we're going to provide graphics, it needs to be, less about bullet points and more about accompanying things to show and kind of pops of information where you can grab attention and bring it back. What are the other interesting things? And this is actually something that Mike taught us and I did some research afterwards, is there's this classification that 6Connects calls zombie users, which I think is a really interesting term. It's those that get onto a broadcast and then tune themselves out. And they're tuned out because at the end of the broadcast, when you shut down, you see 20% of the people that don't leave the Zoom afterwards. Let's say if Zoom is your medium, and you could leave that on for 2 hours and they'd still be there because they've tuned out. They've probably left their computer on and they've gone to the other room.
Okay. So Mike, what do you do with zombies? I didn't think we get to zombies and we get to fun apps and
we have a way of,
we're making this almost fun, the whole thing.
We have a way of removing. There's some special code that Adam and his team can put into our system and remove those zombies at the end of the webcast or at the end of the event. And that way it clears everybody out of the system, and then you can start fresh with your counters for the next day, if that makes sense. Or
Do you get sort of tagged as a zombie and then they don't let you back in?
it's not that you get tagged, it's just that the system will recognize that, the event is closed
Yeah.
and there's 52 people still in it. And it's like, there's no way that there are 52 people still in it. So you remove those zombies from it and it clears it out.
Okay, so Adam, come back to what are the things you've learned, and also sort of bring in sort of the fact that you didn't do it yourself, that you've got this really smart group of people around you that are constantly watching what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've learned is that you can't be stagnant, that you have to continue to evolve. And especially at this time where technology is starting to catch up with us, we were fortunate that we found 6Connects, and they had already had products that were in this arena. And then we were able to kind of take their products and twist them a little bit to give us something that was more in line with what we wanted to do. I think the flexibility in product really was key for our relationship. I think we would have went with 6Connects either way. And I think the reality is what we found is after being in the system for a couple of months, doing a couple of events, that we went back and I would have these really great conversations with Mike and say, okay, Mike, is there any reason I can't do this? And he would say, well, hold on, let me think. And no, that sounds like it would work. And we would kind of spitball together. So when you talk about working with, these great people around you, it's engaging your vendors, it's engaging your team. And what I like to call, blue sky thinking, you think as big as you possibly can. It doesn't matter how much that thing might going to cost. And then you try to value engineer yourself down to the level you can afford. So I want to do all of these things, throw them all out there. And then, okay, well, we can do that because it's easy. Or I've never thought about this one over here, but if we really take the system and adapt it to do this, or there's this trick I've seen.
Okay, so Mike, how did your engineer's eye roll when you walked in after talking to Adam?
It's a partnership. Adam and his team have done a fantastic job at taking our platform and pushing the envelope in certain ways to help us grow it as well. They've really taken the visual piece of it. And I mean, David, when you look at some of their events, you're at the USC campus, or you're inside of the ballroom that's having this event, or you're inside of the man cave for their band, their head of their band, and looking at each of the different trophies that they've won, the band has won. And you can spin around that event and look at the trophy on a 360-degree turntable. I mean, again, it's taking multiple technologies and using them to their fullest. And that's what Adam and his team have been able to do, working with them together. Like he says, you throw stuff up on the wall, you see what sticks and what doesn't. And you have to push engineering at times, but sometimes they push back. Engineering can push back and say, hey, So.
Well, one of the things we didn't answer properly, in my opinion, was the legacy stuff. Like, what is going to work in both virtual and in real life that you've invented using 6Connect?
Yeah. So I think there are a couple of things, and Mike touched on a few of them earlier. I think the relationship between kind of interactive communication and in-person communication. So things like question and answer, virtual presentation. We know that we're going to continue on some of those means to be able to have that in both. One of the things we have seen really clearly is, at a place like USC where we have a global audience, 450,000 alumni around the world, when we do events only at USC, we have a limited portion of those that are available. And so one of the things that we are going to continue to do is not only is continue broadcasting, all of our events, and what 6Connects enables us to do is have that interaction at a presentation, is to not just put a picture up and send it away to those who are far, but to give them an environment where they can go to and feel connected in a similar way to those in person. And why we know that is because we've broadcast events for years. We've webcast, a handful of events every year for many years. But the engagement that we've seen, especially on something, like our commencement, which was truly hybrid, we had our commencement was over 7 days. We did 14 commencements over 7 days, 2 a day. We had 30,000 guests in person, along with 14,000 students, and we had 45,000 people watching virtually. Whereas normally when we do that in person, we have a larger in-person audience. We have about 60,000 people in person, but our broadcast audience is more like 1,200. And so you're seeing that just grow exponentially. And commencement is a great example of that, but we're seeing it on all events. When we get these reports from 6Connects and from Zoom and from YouTube on where the engagement is, and we can see that our international population viewing makes up 15 to 20% of our audience, that's an audience we could never tap before.
What have you learned about their attention span and their engagement in terms of how do you, because right now there's a lot of controversy around, will hybrid be what we think hybrid is, just turning on the camera, which really it isn't. But what is the formula for knowing when to do a hybrid event, when to do a real in-person event, when to do a virtual event? I mean, there seems to be rules that are going to be evolving on that. And I'd love to hear your wisdom on that.
Yeah, and I think we are still evolving, how we look at that. And as I said earlier, I'm looking forward to learning and figuring that out and continuing to look at it. But as we start to plan our fall semester, our guideline is that we're going to try to do everything hybrid. We think that there's benefit on 95% of the events we do to continue to showcase that to all of our audiences. Now, on some events where there's a more finite guest list, that may change. For certain things, it's hard still to duplicate, some experience virtual. Although I'd say that, the hardest experience is that gala style format. But that's one of the things that we've done best, I think, in 6Connects.
Well, how did you do that? Everyone's going to want to know how to continue doing a gala that you don't have to go to, but it's successful.
Right. So we built out, and we've done this both fully virtual and hybrid. We build out a virtual ballroom. So we build out a virtual, you arrive to a virtual lobby, and the virtual lobby directs you to, areas like a virtual ballroom. When you enter into this virtual ballroom, it's set up with custom rendered tables and chairs. You can adjust the linen color. This is all, work that any graphic designer can do in a 3D program. And what you do is assign everybody to a table. So just like when you're in person, you come up, you get your table card, you're at table number 1, Mike's at table number 2, you head off to your tables and you sit down and you socialize with those people at the table. What we came to is that's so important, right? The level of engagement at a big event where you're just in a huge group of people versus at a table where you're at a finite group of people. And if you're in an industry like we are, that group of people at that table has been curated around you and around the host of the table so that you're engaging in a very specific way. And so every person on these virtual events would get a Zoom table number, and they'd arrive and they'd go into this virtual ballroom and click on table number 2, and that would take them to a Zoom room. And that Zoom room is where they would watch their event and be part of it, but in 2 ways. So there would be a virtual concierge, an employee of the university or a student in many cases, who would be able to help them through the process of saying, hi, you're here. You're going to be able to see your event. And in a couple of minutes, we're going to have you click over to our other site, and we're going to show you how to go side by side. So on one side of your screen, you're going to have your Zoom with all the people at your table. And on the other side, you'll have 6Connects or our broadcast link. And for virtual galas, we would also send food to all of them. We've worked with wonderful caterers, and many in our industry have done this during this time, right? You've got a box that has beautiful wine. It's got your program printed for the evening, if you have one, graphics, and you've got your food with instructions on how to reheat it. And the area where we found to be the most success in this, oddly enough, is that what we implemented in our programs is what we call the socialization break. Right? If you think about it, when you're on Zoom and you're watching a program, you don't want to talk over the program. So in the middle of our program, we stopped and we said, everybody, now is the time for you to take a moment, talk to the people at your table, get to know each other, and have a moment to come together socially. We'd spend anywhere between 10 and 15 minutes, depending on the program, where we didn't do anything but let them talk.
Wow.
And we found that being the key level of success.
So,
we didn't lose anybody.
I mean, for me, my whole thing about events, or how do you scale intimacy? Because people, if they're just in a big room, how many times have you been to a big reception and you don't talk to anybody because it's so intimidating? So you're sort of
or you talk to the people that you already know because they're the people that you're comfortable with.
So how do you, on those tables, is there some sort of facilitator, or does it just happen normally?
So a combination. And I think one of the areas that we do with those table hosts that we have is that we really work with them on training them on not only the kind of technical side of how do you answer somebody if they can't figure out how to unmute themselves, or, any of those arenas, but also give them things to engage. For instance, we always do a table picture. We get everybody together, we get them to take a picture. And amazingly, what we found, and I thought this was crazy when we first started to do this, when we do virtual galas, 75 to 80% of the people are dressed up at home when we do virtual galas. Yeah. They crave that experience so much that they will put on a suit, they will put on a tuxedo, on a ball gown, and sit at their kitchen table or on their couch at these events because they miss it.
How do you facilitate the photograph and things like that? Somebody has to come in and say, "Oh, now we're going to do the photo."
Yeah, so the table host has that set, and they take screenshots of our Zoom. They lay it out. We tell them how to make sure they hide people's cameras who have them turned off so they get a good shot. And then we distribute those. And they also work on engagement. Many times what we do, and this is why it works so well with some of our USC properties, is we have students that have scholarships in the program that we're doing a gala for, and they're the table hosts. So there's built-in conversation because they can say thank you.
Yep.
They can be engaged.
Well, you're speaking my language, because I believe that event organizers are not event organizers anymore, but they're collaboration artists. And in order for us to connect people, it's not just the technology, it's how we use the technology. And it sounds like between both of you, Mike and Adam, that this is the perfect type of marriage where the collaboration artist and the experience creator work together to sort of make it so people become intimate with each other, and they want to remember their conversations and get to know people. And is that it seems like your theory?
Yeah, very, very true. One of the things that Adam keyed in on here is, what is hybrid today? And David, what we're finding, as an industry expert here, the definition is still not defined. The story is still out there somewhere. What is it going to be? What is it ultimately going to be as we continue to move towards, real hybrid events that are going on? Because it is unique and different, and everybody's still trying to figure out. There's no Webster's dictionary on what hybrid is, because it's changing every day.
Do you think it's going to segment itself into deconstructing various audiences for different purposes? Or is it like Mike Mingus, I think he was from in Las Vegas, talked about how that everything about events is going to be deconstructed, like recipes. And we're going to be putting people together who really, like when you take the algorithms, like TikTok does, and know exactly what they want, and make them so that they're going to be able to connect and meet.
One of the things that the Six Minutes platform we do really well at is keeping those environments open for an extended period of time, so that content is available, not just during the live portion, but what we're seeing is a lot of people coming back afterwards. Mm-hmm. Because ultimately, if you have a physical event, let's just say you have an organization, they have 100 people, and the owner and the wife go to Las Vegas. They go to the physical event themselves. There's still 99 other employees that have not gained any knowledge from that event because they're not there. And that's where that virtual piece is really starting to come into play. And those 99 other employees, they have to work during the day. So again, that content being available whenever is really another key feature of what virtual has to offer to customers.
Do you think that the second screen will become on site is going to become part of the virtual hybrid world?
Yeah, we were already doing some second screen things before pandemic. I think it was becoming more readily, not just available, but more readily accepted and okay that people would like to have a second screen. And I mean, the QR code was kind of the beginning of it, which has been many years now. But I think we were just starting to see some technology hit that made that second screen experience better when we implemented AR and VR and some of those pieces. I think that there's two things. First off, I want to go back to something Mike said, because I think it's really important. I don't think there's one recipe for everything. And I think that, one of the areas that I feel really strongly about is that you have to examine not just, it used to be we looked at our audience and we looked at a single audience. Your audience is now multiple audiences. And so when we look at how we are building our events, and to your point about the, deconstructed, I think you have to deconstruct it to rebuild it based on what your audience needs. And can we feed an audience just a la carte? Yeah, but might they like a la carte? No, they might want a 5-course meal that's served to them in that way. And you have to know the audience in enough ways, or you have to be able to provide things where you can do it any way you want. And to me, that's where I've always come, is that you've got to give somebody either the experience where you can sit them down and strap them in and say, you're on our tour and we're going to make it great for you. Or you have to give them the experience and say, you can get on our tour, or you can experience all the things on our tour by yourself in any order you want by leading yourself through it. And I think virtual is the perfect example of that. When we look at hybrid and we look at the virtual content, we have some people that want to click in and they want to go and they want to follow the dotted line. And we have some people that want to say, screw that dotted line. I want to go from point A to point Z and then back to M and then to B and back and forth. And you have to have a technology that's flexible enough and a process that's flexible enough to be able to say, you can do whatever you want. And know when it's the appropriate time to use them, I think is always the key. As events professionals, one of the things that we get to do is tell people how to consume their content. We get to say, I'm presenting to you this beautiful thing that you should be looking at that is going to be impactful to your life in this way, right? Now we get to say, how do you want to consume this thing that's going to be impactful to your life? Do you want to look at it now? Do you want to look at it later? Do you want to look at it in pieces? And have different audiences choose the way they want, which is really powerful for the audience member, which we've never really given them the ability to do before.
Have you seen a trend in any particular direction? Like, where is the center of gravity in this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think it's about flexibility. And I think, the word that we've used in the pandemic all across the board is pivot and flexibility. With the ability for us to change on a dime as things have happened. And I think that's going to continue to be the key, is how we as an industry, we remain flexible, and that, and the events and products that we continue to see come out provide us better tools to show how we can flexibly provide content to our audiences in the various ways they want to consume it.
But are you seeing this you deal with college graduates too, as opposed to adults? Yeah. Are you seeing any differentiation in the different audiences now? Like what?
They want to move around. They want to move around on their own speed. One of the tools that we have within the 6 platform is what's called broadcast messaging. So to Adam's point, you might have a 10 o'clock or an 11 o'clock webcast that's going to go live. But a lot of people might not want to watch it then. They might want to say, I want that hour of time to move around and go look at other content, absorb other content. So the broadcast message will spit up a message, will inform people, hey, this webcast is going to begin in 10 minutes. Please make your way to the auditorium. But what we're seeing is people are doing what they want to do. They want to control their own destiny. So we have the tools to help guide them and drive them. But at the same time, they have the ability to move around how they want.
What about the communication style in terms of this? Like, we talk about this kind of interview style, or is it keynotes, short keynotes? Is it outward bound experiential learning? What are the styles of learning that we're seeing? We're talking with a university here. Like, what styles of teaching? Because we're all learning whenever we go to an event. That work best in this next audience, even though, yes, you have a lot of you want flexibility, but is there any sort of basis theory that we're sort of starting with?
Yeah. And in fact, we had a great event with a couple of faculty members early last year where our president interviewed some innovators, one of which who had posted on Instagram that she had built her own light board for her virtual learning that she could write on and then could be seen for all of her class. And it got picked up by millions of hits, and she was on CNN and all sorts of things. And I think what we're seeing in learning is the idea that more tools to be able to showcase more than just me sitting here and talking to you in different ways is the way that education is moving in that manner. And so we've picked off and pulled off a lot of that in kind of how we have looked at presentation, and again, what we've learned about attention span with virtual: shorter, more packed with content. If you're going to do visuals, less about saying the same thing, not reinforcing content, not showing new content.
I've been fascinated about why I buy this crap on Instagram and as a presentation style.
Yeah.
Is that creeping into the way people are learning?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think pop culture, as it now has become tech pop culture, infects everything that we do. We all, I think all of us, if we're not already using Instagram and other sources, Facebook Lives, we're falling behind, and we're always waiting for the new piece to come get us.
Right.
And I think things like Instagram, one of the things that I love about Instagram Live is the way their feed structure works with comments. That you see it on screen, it's everybody reads it. It's really clear when something's liked. there are certain things that we continue to try to mimic in the events we do. How do we do something like that in another engine? And you've got products that are coming online constantly that say, oh, I can do this better. I can do it different. And that, I think, is what's exciting about now.
Is that what's going to be in this? Tom, is that going to be in the fun app part? You remember how speakers hate those screens where everybody comments behind them? I don't know if that's going to work in real life because they want to kill themselves when they see the comments sometimes.
That actually is one of the features that is available through the Sokoloff platform, and the audience loves it. They love the ability to make those comments and just sort of be anonymous, but we also do have the ability for you to delete those if they're inappropriate.
Oh, okay.
So
they can
good.
Be
controlled, if that makes sense.
So in wrapping this up, I can talk forever about this. It's been so fascinating. I'd love to hear from both of you. The obvious question about, even though you can't answer it, I want you to put your hat on to say what's next in your minds that you want to experiment with. It may not be right. And Adam, I'm sure you have this, your daily meetings with your team. They're probably bouncing off the walls with ideas.
Yeah. I think we're constantly trying to figure out where we want to go next. I think for us, it's the different ways that we can look at hybrid events that I'm excited about. How we can integrate even more so the in-person and virtual to create communication between those that are on site and those that are virtual. And we're just really starting to see some tools that are hitting the market to do. I think given the next 6 months or so, we're going to see a flurry of activity in the tech events scene. And if we're not, please, everybody who's listening to this, start generating your ideas and getting them out there to those in the tech scene, because that's where it's at.
What ideas are you looking for?
I think we're looking for ways to continue to engage that hybrid audience or that virtual audience once we're back in person. We know that we, for instance, at USC are going to be back in person in the fall. And we want to still engage that audience in overseas or outside of Los Angeles that we know was so engaged over this pandemic. We don't want to lose them. And so how do we do that when we have then half of the audience or 3/4 of the audience in person and keep that other audience, not excited to be there and feeling like they're getting the same experience or better?
I've been going to a lot of my board meetings and things like that with a virtual audience, and we forget the virtual audience is there.
Yep.
So it's interesting. Yeah. Mike, what do you think about what's next?
That multi-screen engagement is going to be key, of having people both in the virtual world and in the physical world engaging with each other, engaging with the content, engaging with the speakers. We are just seeing a huge move from the PC side of things, PCs or Macs, to the mobile experience. So that's really just the numbers of people connecting via mobile is just going through the roof.
Well, that makes sense because we're now out and about.
So it varies based on age group. I will tell you that. I've got events that are done in colleges and in high schools and even elementary, where you see a lot of kids on phones. And then as you move up toward events that are in a little bit older crowd, they're more on the computer side of things. But what's nice about our platform, again, is the ability, we can see that, we can understand that, we can see it, and we can make adjustments as needed. We are working on a better mobile experience for our customers because we see that need. It needs to be complete mobile experience for people.
Fantastic. Well, Mike, why don't we find out how we can get in touch with you, because this sounds so fascinating. I want to get on the fun app store right away and see what you got cooked.
Unique, because I used to do demos just purely on the platform itself and its features and benefits, and I've now shifted to starting my actual demonstration of, I call it the fun things, that people can do, because ultimately that's what they're looking for. And so once I go through all the fun things, they're like, oh, the platform, that's great. That's good. We know the platform is good because everybody uses it. But we didn't realize that you can engage so much with the platform and with our partners, because we can't do it alone. It's a lot to do with our partners as well.
I've interviewed a lot of people on this topic, and that is very engaging, the way you're positioning it. I'm very, very impressed with that. And it sounds like Adam has been too, since he's been all in, because when you deal with academics, in the most part, they're going to make sure that it's done right? Adam, tell us how people can get in touch with you to find out more about how you guys are doing stuff at USC.
They're always welcome to email me. I'm Adam R at USC. We also have a website where cultural relations and university events. So it's crew.usc.edu, and happy to answer questions. Again, I love to collaborate with those across the nation and around the world. We talk quite often with other schools and other event producers as to how they're doing, what they're doing, to all make sure that we are learning from each other. And like I said, stealing and borrowing from each other.
Yep. It's fantastic.
Well,
Well, thank you guys.
For people to get in touch with me is through my LinkedIn account, Mike.Sokoloff at 6connects.com, is Mike.Sokoloff at 6connects.com, or
Okay.
my LinkedIn profile on LinkedIn is another great way for you to reach me.
And the website for the company?
6connects.com. Number
Okay,
6, CONNEX.com.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys. This has been a total pleasure and a trip into the future. And I really appreciate it, because I think people are struggling with this today more than ever, because everyone that I've talked to says, I don't know. And you guys have really figured it out. So I'm impressed. Thank you so much.
Thanks, David. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the Gather Geeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter at GatherGeeks, or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of Gather Geeks. Until then, gather on.